Okay, so today where do we have to read? I think we have to read, but a third power of possibility.
Yes,
Yes.
Rangan.
Yes.
Yeah.
Jyoti Anand will
So we
read.
start.
Yes.
We'll start alphabetically. Then I'm beginning to
Okay,
read.
okay,
Today
do
I
that.
have the text.
Okay, do that.
But the third power or possibility of the infinite consciousness can be admitted. Its power of self-absorption, of plunging into itself, into a state in which self-awareness exists, but not as knowledge and not as all knowledge. The all would then be involved in pure self-awareness, and knowledge and the inner consciousness itself would be lost in pure being. This is luminously the state which we call the superconscious in an absolute sense, although most of what we call superconscient is in reality not that, but only a higher conscient, something that is conscious to itself and only superconscious to our own limited level of awareness. This self absorption, this trance of infinity, is again no longer luminously but darkly the state which we call the inconscient. For the being of the infinite is there, though by its appearance of inconscience it seems to us rather to be an infinite non being. A self oblivious intrinsic consciousness and force are there in that apparent non being, for by the energy of the inconscient, an ordered world is created. It is created in a trance of self absorption, the force acting automatically and with an apparent blindness as in a trance, but still with the inevitability and power of truth of the infinite. If we take a step further and admit that a special or a restricted and partial action of self absorption is possible to the infinite, an action not always of its infinity concentrated limitlessly in itself, but confined to a special status or to an individual or cosmic self determination, we have then the explanation of the concentrated condition or status by which it becomes aware separately of one aspect of its being. There can then be a fundamental double status, such as that of the Nirguna standing back from the and absorbed in its own purity and immobility, while the rest is held back behind a veil and not admitted within that special status. In the same way, we could account for the status of consciousness, aware of one field of being or one movement of it, while the awareness of all the rest would be held behind and veiled, or as it were, cut off by a waking trance of dynamic concentration from the specialized or limited awareness, occupied only with its own field or movement. The totality of the infinite consciousness would be there, not abolished, recoverable, but not evidently acute, active only by implication, by inherence, or by the instrumentality of the limited awareness, not in its own manifest power and presence. It will be evident that all these three powers can be accepted as possible to the dynamics of the infinite consciousness, and it is by considering the many ways in which they can work that we may get a clue to the operations of Maya.
Yeah. One big para, one page, and he is explaining to you. Now, what is the subject? The subject is this Brahman, Purusha, Ishvara. At three levels, you are experiencing the reality and the physical world in different ways. So that's what he's trying to explain now, why that is possible. Again, you go back to the basic idea of the water, ice, and water vapor. How the hell does that one thing become three things? By what power? What magic? Okay. So these are the three powers of Maya that he is explaining to you. Earlier, two paras he has already told us. The first is a variable, self-variable oneness. Okay. Infinite variation in oneness. Okay. This is possible. It can become men, it can become trees, it can become individuals, it can become a group, it can become stones, it can do all sorts of things. So, infinite variable oneness. It is variable, but oneness. Behind that, there is a oneness. This is power number one. Power number two, self limitation. It can limit itself. In our case, we can also limit our own power, okay, but not really, okay. We can use Say we are capable of running very fast, but we can run slow. But we do not cancel the capacity to run fast. Whereas this other thing, okay, this Satchidananda is capable of cancelling its other powers and limiting itself. So that's the interesting part. Okay, self-determination. It can make itself supermind. It can make itself overmind, intuition. It can make itself matter, life, and mind. Self-limitation. The next third power is the self-absorption. It can plunge into itself and completely forget everything else. Okay, it can be aware only of itself, and that awareness is very interesting. We'll discuss that. So these are the three powers. Remember, it can self-variable oneness. There's a it can vary its own reality, but it is based in oneness. Second, self-limitation. It can limit itself purposely. That's the reason why consciousness becomes unconsciousness. Okay? The Shakti becomes weakness in the physical world. And third is self-absorption. This is very interesting. This is transcendent. It goes into itself. It concentrates only into itself and is not aware of anything else except itself. And even that awareness is a very interesting thing which he is telling. So now we go to each sentence. But a third power or possibility of the infinite consciousness can be admitted. Its power of self-absorption, of plunging into itself, into a state in which self-awareness exists, but not as knowledge and not as all knowledge. Now, can you understand what he's saying? In fact, it is the only thing that exists. It is God who concentrates himself. He pulls himself. There is no manifestation. Manifestation means going outwards. Okay, he creates the universe, but he's not creating the universe. He is pulling himself and self-absorption. He is going into himself. He is aware only of himself. But what is the nature of this awareness? Is it knowledge? And he is also saying all knowledge. Now, all knowledge is easy to understand. The universe. It does not know the universe. All knowledge means I know everything that is there in the universe. But at that point, when he is absorbing himself, he is not aware of the universe, therefore he does not have all knowledge. But now what is his knowledge? Does he not know himself? Okay, you have to understand what he's saying, because at our level, there is object and subject. Huh? Isn't it? When we are studying the Life Divine and the book. The book is the object, and what we are trying to study is the meaning of what is written down there. That's the object. And who is understanding that? The subject. But as you keep going higher and higher in consciousness, the difference between subject and object starts becoming less and less and less. Again, we come back to the idea of the Purusha and the Prakriti. At this level, they are totally different, subject and object. But as you keep going up, the subject and object start becoming one. And at the highest level, subject becomes the object. In fact, I should put it the other way around. All the objects that are possible to be created are the subject itself. The divine himself, with his own substance, is going to create all these things. That's why he's saying not as knowledge, but as self-awareness. It's interesting, no? There is no knowledge at the higher level. In fact, there are three things. No? There is the knower, there is the known, and there is a link between the two is knowledge. But at the highest level, since there is only oneness, there cannot be three. So the knower and the known become one, and knowledge disappears. You know yourself, but it's not knowledge anymore, as we understand it. Okay, clear? That's why you have to understand what he's saying. Knowledge and not all knowledge. All knowledge is clear of the universe. No? Okay. What? I want a little feedback. Okay, so the all would then be involved in pure self-awareness. Whatever is there, possibility of the all in the universe becomes only pure self-awareness. It becomes only, it's all part of me. I am conscious only of myself. and knowledge and the inner consciousness itself would be lost in pure being. Okay, the knowledge of yourself would become lost in pure being. It's only a substance which is conscious of itself. This is the highest level. There is a substance which is consciousness, which is Shakti, and which is Ananda. But only that exists. You can look at it as substance, you can look at it as Shakti, you can look at it as Chit, you can look at it as Ananda, but they are all same. Okay, so at the highest level, there is no difference. Remember Brahman, Purusha, Ishvara, that's why he is explaining this to explain to you how it is possible to see three levels. Brahman, Purusha, Ishvara, Maya, Prakriti, Shakti. So, very clear? You have to grant three powers to the Supreme Consciousness or the Supreme Satchidananda. First, the power of self-variable oneness. It can become a variety of things, but behind the variety of things, there is a oneness lurking in the background. Okay. Today in the morning, I had an interesting idea, and I'm sharing it with you. Because it's related to even the Purusha Prakriti aspect also. And what we are discussing now also is relevant. It may be a little far-fetched, but still it's worth it. Take a piece of paper, blank paper from your notebook, okay, and keep it in front of yourself. Then take out a 100 rupee note and keep it on the table. What's the difference? Both are paper. Okay. Are they of the same value?
No. But according
the both are paper. You can treat them as both paper. But behind that 100 rupee note, there is the subtle, unexpressed value. You can use that for a value and it will give you power. Okay. So that is what Sadhguru is saying. Okay. The value behind is the Purusha. And the outer, the paper is the Prakriti. Or you can also think of it as this, okay? The consciousness and all the objects that it is creating, okay? So that's the difference. There's a consciousness which is there underneath, which is the real thing. You can compare that to even to your body-mind life. Body-mind life is nothing but blank paper. That's why it has got no importance at all. It is there today, it disappears.
Hello.
Yes, tell me.
You know, things change from circumstance to circumstance, from attitude to attitude.
Okay.
For example, if you are in the Sahara Desert, it's very hot.
Yes.
You don't have water.
Yes.
Now, I may have $1 million.
Okay, no use.
And you have a bottle of ice cold water.
Okay, which is
Then
more?
What is more valuable?
Yes.
$1 million or the ice cold water bottle?
Yes, that's exactly. So what example you are giving is very interesting. At the physical level, level 1, the real $1 million has no value at all for you. The body-mind life has got more value. Okay. The $1 million is the real power, but it is no value at all. When you rise to the highest level, the water bottle, okay, is when you have everything, you don't need the hot water bottle. All the examples that we give to oneself absolutely sometimes don't fit in perfectly, but basically the same idea is there everywhere. Okay, there are values that go on changing. That's exactly what Surendra is trying to explain to us. At different levels, the values go on changing. That's exactly what he's trying to tell us. Okay, so all knowledge and no knowledge, here's this one. The all would then be involved in pure self-awareness, and knowledge and the inner consciousness itself would be lost in pure being. Yeah, there's no knowledge. You yourself are everything. So where's the question of knowledge? You don't have to seek knowledge. Knowledge you have to seek at the lower levels. But when you are yourself everything, there's no knowledge. This is luminously the state which we call the superconscious in the absolute sense. The superconscious is the transcendent. The transcendent is not aware of the physical world. Okay. Although most of what we call superconscious is in reality not that, but only a higher conscious, something that is conscious to itself and only superconscious to our own normal level of consciousness. So what he's saying is, we are talking of superconscious, but when you compare it to the lower, then it is superconscious. Otherwise, it's not superconscious, it's just consciousness. Okay, you have asked me to write about consciousness. This will be one of the things that comes up. Okay, so this self-absorption, the capacity of the consciousness to pull itself into itself, concentration. At our level, you could say concentration. Okay, blot out all the things of the physical world, the sounds of the traffic, the call of the birds. Okay, everything you call, you close your doors and windows, even use, if you want, earplugs, and close your eyes. You are self-absorbed. You are aware of nothing outside yourself. Self-absorption. This self-absorption, this trance of infinity is again no longer luminously, but darkly, the state which we call the inconscient. So the power of the self-absorption is double. At the highest level, it's a self-absorption in light. And at the lowest level, also it's a self-absorption. It's a concentrated condition, but in darkness. Okay. They are the same, but a mirror images. Okay. They are very, very similar in so many ways. We have discussed this once before. I just repeat. Both are seed forms. The superconscious is producing itself, out of itself it is producing the universe and the multiplicity of the universe. Okay. But it is itself plunging into it. So it is the origin of creation. But if you see from the lower part matter, it's also the origin of creation. Okay. From that is coming out life, and is coming out matter. So in spiritual experience, this becomes one of the big problems which we have to face. Which is the real thing? Is it really matter which is the real thing? The real origin of everything? Or is it superconscious, which is, and you don't come to know the solution unless you go to the supermind. Then you realize that the supermind is the real origin of things. It is true that the inconscient is also an originator, but it's a secondary originator. The inconscient can't exist without the superconscient, but the superconscient can exist without the inconscient. It's a way of saying. Okay. So self-absorption in two levels, highest level and lowest level. Self-absorption, this trance of infinity is again no longer luminously but darkly, the state which you call inconscient. For the being of the infinite is there, though by its appearance of inconscience, it seems to us rather to be an infinite non-being. It seems to be non-existent, but it is there. It has the power of the limitation. It has limited itself. Okay. You have to apply the second power. It is created, rather to be an infinite non-being. A self-oblivious intrinsic consciousness and force are there in that apparent non-being. Matter has energy, it has consciousness. We see that. Science has discovered that matter has energy, but they have not yet discovered that it is consciousness. Okay, they will come to that soon enough, I hope. For by the energy of the inconscient, an ordered world is created. Yeah, very, very clear. But it's not a world that is created, it's an ordered world. There is a sequence and a logic to everything. There is a connectedness. This is what everybody is realizing. Okay, those who study nature, okay, the trees are connected with matter, the trees are connected with the animals also are all connected with themselves. Okay, so it's very interesting. There is interdependence. Trees depend on birds, and the birds also depend on trees. I'm only giving one example, but it is the oneness is there everywhere, the connectedness. That's what I'm saying, and the connectedness is the ordered world. It's not disordered world, it's ordered world. It is created in a trance of self-absorption. The force acting automatically and with an apparent blindness as in a trance, but still with an inevitability and the power of truth of the infinite. This is the instinct in animals it seems to be acting very, very intelligently, but actually it is acting mechanically. Okay. If we take a step further and admit that a special or a restricted and a partial action of self-absorption is possible to the infinite, an action not always of its infinity, concentrated limitlessly in itself, but confined to a special status or to an individual or cosmic self-determination, we have then the explanation of the concentrated condition or status by which it becomes aware separately of one aspect of its being. Okay. As I told you, we can also limit our own power. But when we are limiting our own power, the real power is not getting cancelled. But in the superconscient, the Satchidananda, when it is limiting itself, it purposely loses its total awareness. It's aware only of the limited condition. Okay? So now he is explaining what? There can then be a fundamental double status, such as that of the Nirguna, standing back from the Saguna and absorbed in its own purity and immobility, while the rest is held back behind a veil. It is forgotten and not admitted within that special status. So when you are in one consciousness, you are aware only of that and you are not aware of the others. Okay? When you are in the physical body, you think that you are the physical body, you are not aware of your soul. When you go to the self, you are aware of your self. Okay, you are aware of your consciousness, you are aware of your the self, the Brahman. But the world becomes unreal. So that's the funny part. Okay. So it can station itself in one or the other. Then now he is saying Nirguna is the impersonal aspect of the divine. Nirguna, no, the featurelessness, and standing back from the Saguna and absorbed in its own purity and immobility. The word purity and immobility is clear because we have said many times, when the Brahman consciousness, the self, purity, what does it suggest to you? It suggests oneness, unity. Because if there is no oneness, there cannot be purity. If there is an impure thing, it is not one but two, three. Okay. So when Sridhar is using the word purity, it's interesting because it's got different connotation, but it also suggests oneness. Okay. And immobility, no movement at all. Okay. So while the rest is held back behind a veil and not admitted within that special status. That special status is the one that is makes conscious to itself. In the same way, we could account for the status of consciousness aware of one field of being or of one movement of it, while the awareness of all the rest would be held behind and veiled, or, as it were, cut off by a waking trance of dynamic concentration from the specialized or limited awareness occupied only with its own field of movement. I think we come back to the idea of the Ishvara Koti and the Jiva Koti. Okay? The Jiva Koti is one who experiences one aspect of the existence, or in other words, one plane, and it is not aware of the other planes. That's why if you are in the impersonal, you can deny the existence of the divine. You can say it doesn't exist. But an Ishvara Koti, according to Ramakrishna's terminology, is one who can remain on several planes of consciousness at the same time. Okay. So, and Srivamda wants that for the Superman. Superman should be included in the Jiva Koti consciousness. Okay. So, in the same way, we could account for the status of consciousness aware of one field of being or one movement of it, while the awareness of the rest would be held behind and veiled, or as it were, cut off by a waking trance of dynamic concentration, waking from the specialized or limited awareness occupied only with its own field and movement. Srivamda gives the example of when you are concentrating on one thing. Okay? Suppose let's take a mechanic. Okay? Now some mechanics have come to repair my geyser. Okay, so when they are repairing my geyser, are they aware that their home is there, they have a mother, they have a father who is working somewhere? Are they aware of all these things? No. All that is put into the background. So that's exactly what he's saying, is exactly that. The Satchidananda has the power to concentrate on one thing and put everything into the background. Okay. So, as it is, the totality of the infinite consciousness would be there, not abolished, but recoverable, but not evidently active. Active only by implication, by inherence, or by the instrumentality of the limited awareness, not in our own manifest power or presence. It will be evident that all these three powers can be accepted as possible to the dynamics of the infinite consciousness. At our level, very difficult to imagine that these things can all exist, but the infinite consciousness has a power to do these three things at the same time. It can become one and the many at the same time. It can limit itself, and it can also absorb itself completely, forgetting everything else. It will be evident that all these three powers can be accepted as possible to the dynamics of the infinite consciousness. And it is by considering the many ways in which they can work that we may get a clue to the operations of Maya. So Maya is exactly that, the power to limit itself. Okay. As I said, the Maya is the root word in Sanskrit is ma, to measure, to limit. Srivastava uses the words very interestingly. He coins the words. Is it? Geometrize and psychologize. If you remember. Okay. Geometrize means give it form and shape and color and limitations. Give it a geometrical form. Square, round, polygon, hexagon, whatever you want. Okay. But also psychologize. Even your emotions can be made vast and big, it can be made small and insignificant. Your mind also can be made vast and big and insignificant. Everything can be made like. So, interesting para. So he has told you that if you want to understand what Maya is, we come back to our famous example of water, ice, water vapor. How is that possible? It's possible because the power of Maya is reflected even in the lower levels of consciousness, of existence. Okay? So,
Then at the higher level, what is Maya?
pardon? I didn't follow. What is Maya?
At lower level, Maya is showing, then what at higher level also Maya shows its
Okay.
impact.
I've understood your question. So you have to give three meanings to Maya. Okay. The first meaning at the highest level is Maya is to be interpreted as the power of the divine to create infinite forms and real forms. Okay. When you are in the superconscious, in the supermind, you realize that the divine is creating real forms. They may be temporary. But they are real in time and space. Okay, they may come into being and disappear, but they are real. They are not unreal. That's the first meaning of Maya. The second meaning of Maya, you see the physical world as only images of no importance, and that's the illusion. So Maya is the illusion. Second meaning. Okay, and the third meaning of Maya is the physical world itself. What you see is not the reality. It is fooling you. Okay, so that's the Maya. Okay, so these are the three meanings of Maya, you can say. Okay, and the word Maya was very made popular by Shankara, and that's why he has been misunderstood also. He actually meant that the power to create real forms, but he has been made the votary of the theory of illusionism, which is not absolutely true. Even Buddha did not say that the world is absolutely unreal. It is the followers, because Buddha never wrote anything, he only gave teachings. So, in fact, he refused to even discuss philosophy. He said it will confuse you. So, but the Buddhist texts, Nagarjuna and others who wrote down the concepts as they are understood, it is they who say that the physical world is unreal. But even in Buddhism, there are two branches, Hinayana and Mahayana. then they admit that the physical world is not absolutely unreal. Okay, we have got about,
Rangadhar,
yeah, tell me,
Rangadhar, could you please repeat the second and third status
the powers. Huh?
of
Okay,
Maya? Yeah, of
The
Maya.
first one is clear?
Of Maya, Rangadhar of Maya.
Yeah.
The second and the third meaning.
Yeah. The power of the Maya, number one, to create real forms. Okay. Second meaning, the power to create illusions. When you are in the spiritual planes of consciousness, you see illusions. And who is doing that? Maya is doing that, because Maya at the highest level is pure. And when it comes down, it is also becoming limited. So you interpret Maya at that time as the world is illusion. So that's a second. In fact, in our Indian language also very often they say, okay, everything is Maya. Okay, so it is illusion. When you go from here,
There is a saying, no, that man is led by his Moh and Maya.
yes, that's right. At our level, that's right. Moha is confusion and delusion, and Maya is you're not seeing the reality. That's right. Okay. Shall we
I
read
thought
next?
that Maya means an illusion.
Not only that. That's
Or,
exactly.
a false idea. Like a man may think, if I have lots of money and if I'm very rich, I'll be happy.
Yes. Okay.
So it
That's an
could be
extension.
a Maya is, like something which is attracting you to something, but it really, in essence, doesn't really help you to be happy.
Yes, I agree with what you're saying. That's the second meaning. But in the physical world, do you see the physical objects as illusion? You don't.
No.
You don't. You give it full value. You are giving value to something that is unreal. So that's why the world is itself Maya. Okay. So the meaning that Yasmin is giving is at the second level. When you take your consciousness to the spiritual planes of consciousness, very often you will see the physical world as unreal. You will see it only as images with no substance. Okay, like a photograph. Okay, that's what you see. Okay.
And the third meaning is this world.
Yeah.
This world is Maya.
Third meaning is the world itself is Maya. The world itself is Maya. All that you see in the physical world is not the reality. Okay. So I think we still have 10 minutes, so we can read the next one. Oh,
Jyoti Anand can read.
Shilpa, I think, is the next alphabetically.
Okay. No,
Unless
Jyoti
Jyoti
Anand.
wants to. Jyoti, will you read?
yeah. Jyoti, you have the text? Sometimes she doesn't have the text.
Oh, I can.
Okay. Adjust your mic, Jyoti.
Shilpa. But Jyoti is saying she can't read. Shilpa, you read.
Okay.
Okay.
The mic is not good. Shilpa, you read.
Okay. This throws light incidentally on the opposition made by our minds between pure consciousness, pure existence, pure bliss, and abundant activity. The manifold application, the endless vicissitudes of being, consciousness, and delight of being that take place in the universe in the state of pure consciousness and pure being. We are aware of that only. Simple, immutable self existence without form or object. And we feel that to be alone, true and real. In the other or dynamic state, we feel its dynamism to be perfectly true and natural, and are even capable of thinking that no such a experience as that of pure consciousness is possible. Yet, it is now evident that to the infinite consciousness, both the static and dynamic are possible. These are two of its status, and both can be present simultaneously in the universal awareness, the one witnessing the other and supporting it or not, looking at it and yet automatically supporting it, or the silence and status may be there penetrating the activity or throwing it up like an ocean immobile blue, throwing up a mobility of waves on its surface. This is also the reason why it is possible for us in certain conditions of our being to be aware of several different states of consciousness at the same time. There is a state of being experienced in yoga in which we become a double consciousness, one of the surface, small, active, ignorant, swayed by the thoughts and feelings, grief and joy, and all kinds of reactions. The other within calm, vast, equal, observing the surface being within an immovable detachment or indulgence, or it may be acting upon, or it may be acting upon its agitation to quite enlarge, transform it. So too, we can rise to a consciousness above and observe the various parts of our being, inner and outer, mental, vital and physical, and subconscious below all, and act upon one or other or the whole from that higher status. It is possible also to go down from the height or from any height into any of this lower status and take its limited light or its obscurity as our place of working, as our place of working, while the rest that we are is either temporarily put away or put behind, or else kept as a field of reference from which we can get support, tension, or light and influence, or as a status into which we can ascend or receive and from it observe the inferior movements, or we can plunge into trance, get within ourselves and be conscious there while all outward things are excluded, or we can go beyond even this inner awareness and lose ourselves in some deeper other consciousness or some high super conscious. There is also pervading equal consciousness into which we can enter and see all observe all ourselves with one enveloping glance or omnipresent awareness, one and invisible. All this which looks strange and abnormal or may seem fantastic to the surface reason, acquainted only with our normal status of limited ignorance, and its movement divided from our inner higher and total reality becomes easily intelligible and admissible in the light of the larger reason and logic of the infinite, or by the admission of the greater illimitable powers of the self, the spirit in us, which is of one essence with the infinite.
Yeah. So 1.5 page, quite a big one. I don't think we'll have time to finish the whole thing. So basically what he's saying is that this, when we have thought of the three powers, we can say that when we are in one level of consciousness, you can, the rest of it doesn't exist and you feel it to be unreal. In fact, it doesn't even exist. That's why people say there is no God. Okay, you are only the impersonal aspect. But there is another level where you are aware only of the personal aspect of the divine and you say the impersonal does not exist. But it is possible to have both. Okay, it's possible to have. That's what we spoke just now about the Ishvara Koti, one who is capable of remaining at different levels of consciousness at the same time. Okay. Now, this is a very interesting thing in Life Divine, much later in another chapter. Sri Aurobindo speaks about being in the timeless and in time. Okay, and either in time or in timelessness, or we are, our consciousness is in the timelessness, but we are acting in the time, okay, with full consciousness. Or there can be all sorts of things. Our consciousness can plunge into time and act there in a timeless consciousness. Okay, all these things are possible. Many combinations are possible. That's what he's explaining to us. It's also possible for, and that's the reason why, that's what the Gita is saying. Get the divine consciousness, but act in the physical world. Don't go away. Normally, if you act in the physical world, you get identified with the lower forms and you feel that there is no God or there is no higher consciousness. But Gita insists, and Sri Aurobindo also insisting, it is possible to have your in the background of your consciousness, this static, and continue to work in the physical, in the dynamic. Okay, so I gave you one example. Okay, it may not be fully valid, but it's partly valid. Like a young maid servant working in a house. Okay, and she is washing clothes, sweeping the floor, cooking. She's doing all sorts of things. And she has to pay full attention to what she's doing, otherwise the work won't be good. But at the background of her consciousness, she has a 2-year-old child at home, and she is constantly worried about what will happen to him. So in the background of her consciousness, there is this other consciousness, which is the opposite of what you are in. So you can have a consciousness of the oneness at the background, and still from there you can act. But my image is not a very good one, because the oneness can be absolutely a fact, and also the physical action in the physical. It need not remain in the background. You can be in both at the same time. That's what they're saying in the para. Okay, so we'll redo this tomorrow. Tomorrow. Okay, because we have only 2 minutes left, so we'll do this. But this is basically what he's saying in the para. Okay, so shall we stop here today? Okay. Fine. PP 345, and we have to redo throws.
Langadhar, can I say something?
Pardon, I didn't follow.
Means, can I talk to you for 2 minutes?
Oh, yes, you can. Yeah.
When you say there is a no difference on the higher conscious level, there is a no difference between a subject and object. It says it is a oneness. You find oneness in everything, so there is no subject and no object for you.
That's right.
Correct. In everywhere, you can see yourself only, reflection of yours only.
Yeah, that's it. You are in the cosmic consciousness and you see yourself, you are everything. Okay? And in another way of putting it, you become God. Your consciousness is God. It's only the Advaita philosophy that is the daring to say that. Okay? You are essentially God. You are the supreme. Okay? So that's true. That's it. Another word for it is the power of identification. You become what you want to know. Okay.
Okay.
In another place in Life Divine, Sri Aurobindo says that the consciousness, here is putting it different way, but the consciousness has got 3 powers. The power to know anything you want. Second, the power to acquire anything you want. And third, to become anything you want. So these are the 3 powers of the consciousness. Okay. So when you become what you want, you are one with the divine. Okay.
Rangadhar, this knowledge by identity.
Yes.
It is a feature of the supramental consciousness, no? Knowledge by identity.
That's true. Total. But you can have glimpses of the lower levels.
But in a cosmic consciousness, also there can be knowledge by identity.
Yes. In fact, the cosmic identity is that, no? You become everybody else. But you don't become God necessarily. So there are grades. But the identification, the knowledge by identity starts at the lower level of the second, the planes of consciousness. Yes, that's true.
How does one identify oneself with something?
Okay, it's an interesting question. 2 stones cannot merge with oneself. Okay, so that's not possible. But take the next level of consciousness where the substance is much more fluid. Can 2 glasses of water merge with one another? Very clearly, yes. Okay. Then you go to 2 gases. Okay. The 2 gases can become one? Absolutely. So it is your consciousness that is becoming the consciousness of what you want to know, not your body, mind, life. Okay. So identity means that. It's your consciousness which is capable of. And that consciousness.
But how does one find one's consciousness? Are to be conscious of the consciousness in order to be identified with some other consciousness?
The answer to that question is very clear: yoga. And there are so many ways of doing yoga. Okay. So you have to choose any one and go on. That's all. Okay. Shall we stop here today?
Yes.
Thank you, Rangadhar.
Okay. See you tomorrow. Au revoir and have a nice day.